Where were you and what were you doing in 1984? Well, here are a few events that might jog your memory. Super Bowl 18 was played in Tampa at what was then called Tampa Stadium. During the televised broadcast of that game, Apple ran the first ever ad for their new Macintosh personal computer. The movie Terms of Endearment won 5 Oscars. The sitcom Happy Days was canceled after 11 seasons. Prince Harry was born. The musical artist Prince released Purple Rain, and Bruce Springsteen released Born in the USA. Ronald Reagan was reelected to a second term as president in a landslide victory over Walter Mondale. And at the Unitarian Universalist Association General Assembly in Columbus, Ohio in 1984, delegates from UU congregations from all over adopted the principles that are currently in Article 2 of the UUA bylaws. Now, Article 2 is foundational for the work of our UUA and its congregations. It's so important that part of it is right here in our gray hymnal. If you turn to right before the very first hymn, you'll see a list of the 7 principles, and you will see the sources and the purposes. It says, "We, the member congregation of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote." And that stayed the same since 1984, basically. But Unitarian Universalism is a living tradition. It says so right here on our hymnal, singing the living tradition. And we are supposed to do a periodic review of our bylaws. Despite that, Article 2 has not been changed in any major way since the mid-1980s, even though, as we've seen, the world around us has changed dramatically. That doesn't mean nothing's happened over those past 40 or so years. There was some very important work done between 2017 and 2020 when a UUA group developed a report called Widening the Circle of Concern. Now, that report stressed that anti-racism and anti-oppression are at the core of our faith, and they provide a vital framework of living out our values within our congregations and beyond our congregations. So shortly after the release of the Widening the Circle report in late 2020, the UUA Board of Trustees appointed a study commission to finally review Article 2. Board members charged the commission to root its work in love. The board shared a reflection that said, in part, "We assert that our deepest common theological grounding and value is love." Well, 3 years later, the study commission released its final proposal to revamp Article 2. Jeremy, could you display that slide on the screen, please? So you can see this is a visual depiction of some of the new language. It focuses on 6 values. They're in no particular order. They're in a circle. They are inseparable from one another, and love is at the center. Now, there are also in the proposal very detailed descriptions of each value, and I really encourage you to go online to the UUA website and read those detailed descriptions. This morning I'm going to give a very slightly abbreviated description just for time purposes. Importantly, though, each value includes a covenant, a promise about how we can live out that value. And each value is built on the foundation of love. Love is defined as the power that holds us together and the spiritual discipline that keeps us accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values. You just saw the new president of the UUA, Reverend Sophia Betancourt, a few minutes ago, and she was asked about this at the recent General Assembly, and she said, "The work of Article 2 involves asking, what does it mean to hold love at the center of our faith?" So to answer that question, here are a few ideas I've come up with based on some of the work that I'm seeing here at UU Clearwater. Now, I want to be clear here. I am a part-time staff member of the Unitarian Universalist Association, and as such, I cannot and I will not advocate in one way or the other for approval of the proposed new language. That's not what I'm doing this morning. What I am doing is trying to explain what each of these values mean to me. To me, this is what it looks like when we act on our values, holding love at the center. So one of the first values is interdependence, and that's defined in part as we honor, protect, and heal the interdependent web of all existence. We covenant to protect Earth and all beings from exploitation. When I hear this value, I think of Beacon Food Forest, our community garden in the back of our property, where anyone from UU Clearwater or from the wider community can get a small plot of land to plant whatever it is they want to plant, flowers, vegetables. There's a whole array of things out there. The city of Clearwater is looking at this as a model for sustainability in the city. And through a partnership with the Gulf Coast Jewish Family and Community Services, several families who are refugees from Afghanistan are discovering the food forest as a place where they can go to connect with each other, with the earth, with our community and the wider community. In doing so, we are creating new relationships and nurturing existing ones. Now, we could have kept this very peaceful little oasis all to ourselves. We might have said, oh no, we're worried about trespassers, we're worried about damage to the property. But love tells us to widen our circle. Let's talk about the value of pluralism. It says in part, we celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. We covenant to learn from one another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. For me, this value calls to mind a very familiar quote, "We need not think alike to love alike." There are many paths that some call mystery or the divine or God. Here at UUC, we honor each of those paths as we learn from each other. At worship services, social events, humanists, pagans, and Buddhists sit side by side with theists, atheists, and agnostics. During the most recent Interfaith Week we hosted here at UUC, we hosted Sufi dancing, which is a form of physical meditation in the mystical branch of Islam. LULAC, which is the League of United Latin American Citizens, meets regularly at UUC. So does CHISPA, which is a program that builds the power of Latinx voters to protect community rights. Now face it, the bulk of our UUC members are retired, but we have put a deliberate focus on diversity in ages. We spend our money on programs and staff that are designed to attract families, children, and teens. We could focus on programs and activities that appeal to our older, mostly white, largely humanist congregation, but love tells us to widen that circle. There's the value of equity. We declare that every person has the right to flourish with inherent dignity and worthiness. We covenant to use our time, wisdom, attention, and money to build and sustain fully accessible and inclusive communities. Most Unitarian Universalist congregations are overwhelmingly white. The most recent survey I've seen found that up to 83% of UU congregational participation is by people who are white. We're not very different here at UU Clearwater. But for the first time in a long time, maybe if ever, there are 2 people of color on our Board of Trustees, including our Vice President, Eliseo Santana. I wish Eliseo was here this morning. But Eliseo and Soledad Vacar, who is here this morning, are role models with experiences and unique perspectives from which we can all learn and from which our board will be stronger. Electing them to the board is UUC's commitment to inclusivity. Now, we've worked for equity in other ways. When we're on Zoom, there are captions for those who have hearing difficulties. Here in the Octagon, we've invested heavily to ensure the audio is understandable for all. And there are spaces for those who cannot climb the stairs. There are spaces for them to sit. Our children's safety policy has food guidelines because some children are highly sensitive to peanuts or have other food allergies. When we center the voices of those who have been hurt and the concerns of those who've been marginalized, we have stronger institutions, better ideas, deeper relationships. Love tells us to widen the circle. Generosity. We cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. We covenant to freely and compassionately share our faith, presence, and resources. For many people, this value brings to mind the phrase time, talent, and treasure. Most of us volunteer countless hours, use our skills, and donate our financial resources to UUC. But this also means that we are generous with support, comfort, and encouragement, because it really matters that we can rely on one another to help us when we aren't strong. We can adopt a generous attitude in our perspectives so that someone else does not have to be wrong for us to be right. This value also reminds us of our potluck meals. You know, at our potlucks, everybody brings something. Well, they're supposed to. Sometimes people forget, or maybe they can't afford to bring something, but that's okay. We sit and eat together because we care about one another. And you know, I've yet to see a potluck where there wasn't enough food to go around. Somehow there's always enough for everybody. Love tells us to make room at the table and widen the circle. Justice. We work to be diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where we all thrive. We covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of systemic oppression. UU Clearwater is one of about 60 religious organizations that are part of FAST of Pinellas County. These organizations range from Catholic and Jewish congregations to African Methodist, Episcopal, Baptist, non-denominational groups. Needless to say, we differ very widely on theology. But we join together so that we can push local public officials for affordable housing, criminal justice reform, clean water. Despite our theological differences, we agree we are called to do justice in this world. FAST is just one of many ways we do justice here at UU Clearwater, largely under the leadership of our Social Justice Council. There's a Racial Concerns Committee that actively supports local minority entrepreneurs, among other things. A Black Lives Matter banner is displayed on our exterior walls so our neighbors know what we support, and it remains proudly on our campus despite attempts to vandalize it. Last spring, we distributed banned books for the community, and we are a hub for collecting petitions to get an abortion rights constitutional amendment on the Florida ballot. Now, we could play it safe. We could issue a proclamation, or we could raise donations to give to someone else to do the work. But love tells us to join an ever-widening circle. Transformation. This value is defined as adapting to change or adapting to the changing world. We covenant to collectively transform and grow spiritually and ethically. Openness to change is fundamental to our Unitarian and Universalist heritages, never complete and never perfect. Like many congregations, UU Clearwater has a complicated history. There have been at least 3 times over the past 60-plus years when conflicts caused deep divisions in the congregation, and a large number of members left. There was a period of ministerial misconduct that left a legacy of mistrust of religious professional leadership as well as our lay leaders. In some instances, members were given permission to misbehave because no one called them out for bullying or sexism or racism. We could have stayed stuck in these patterns, but we are focused on transformation. We've hired Reverend Amy Kindred as our developmental minister, and she's charged with helping us achieve some goals we've set for ourselves, creating a culture of mutual trust, strengthening our ability to have healthy conflicts that deepen relationships, moving from individualism to community, and developing hospitality practices that will prompt multifaceted growth. Change is difficult, I know it is, but I have found that when I stop fighting change and I try to embrace change, I learn new things. I grow. I have a deeper connection with others. Love calls on me and you and all of us to widen our circle of concern, even when, especially when, it's uncomfortable. These 6 values are part of several revisions to Article 2. There also is new language for the sources and the purpose of the UUA. The proposal will be up for a final vote at the UUA's next General Assembly in June, and the language could be amended before then, so stay tuned. If the new Article 2 is approved, you might ask what happens to the 7, or now 8, principles in the current bylaws. Well, UUA President Sophia Betancourt also addressed that question. She said, "No one can take away the principles and purposes. They are part of who we have been, part of our theological, ethical, and historical documents. But as part of our governing documents," Reverend Betancourt said, "the new Article 2 allows us to talk about our values and invites us to dream." As the UUA Board of Trustees said, "We respond to the call of love because it is our common theological core. It is what can and does motivate us and illuminates our deepest commitments to each other." May it be so.